Everybody, happy hump day. Welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox, and today I'm joined by my fellow Mirror columnist and associate editor Kevin Maguire. Morning, Kevin.
Morning, Foxy.
Now, this is the People's Paper Review, so get into the comments, ask us your questions about whatever issue is burning a hole in the back of your head, and we will do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to open a window and swear at the postman. So, what have we got today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the fact that BP has posted a £5 billion profit in its biggest quarterly boost for a decade. And on the very same day, the Prime Minister went to morning television to tell a 77-year-old who has to ride the buses all day to keep warm that he gave her the bus pass, which, of course, he didn't. And Kevin, the really killer fact here is in the little box on the first page of this spread. Before April, the average energy bill was just under £700, which is about the same amount BP makes every second. And since April, it's gone up to £1,971, which is about what BP makes every 2.5 seconds. Yeah. So despite all this, and despite the fact that even Tory voters want one, the government is still refusing to levy a windfall tax, aren't they? Why? Why won't they just do it?
Yeah, Foxy, that increase in energy bills is absolutely scorching and really burning people in the cost of living crisis. And of course, it could go up higher in October when the cap will be reviewed. And the government's refusal, and Boris Johnson just saying no, he won't do it, to levy that windfall tax, it's picking a side, it's ideological. And for whatever reason, they are defending and promoting the North Sea energy producers who are just getting skyrocketing profits, not because they've invested anything extra, not because they're doing anything different. It's because world prices have gone up, in part because of Ukraine, but they were going up before that. And they picked a side. And politics is all about whose side you're on. And they've gone with the corporates rather than with the consumers. I think it's a big political mistake when the Liberal Democrats first, then Labour backed the windfall tax. Now, of course, it's a one-off tax. It wouldn't be permanent, and it's on those excess profits. Margaret Thatcher introduced a windfall tax.
It's only £1 billion. If you make 5 billion, then 1 billion, you're like, fine, mate, have it. I've still got 4.
Yeah, it's loose change for them. It'll mean a lot for consumers, although it won't mean your bill will go back to where it was. And in fact, in part of Labour's armoury, suspending VAT would probably have a longer term impact. But it's just kind of crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I think the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who opposes a windfall tax, though he was badgered by Mumsnet into saying, well, I might bring in one if they didn't invest in Britain. He doesn't want to do it. Kwasi Kwarteng, the Business Secretary, a real Thatcherite on economics, he's opposed. I think they're on the wrong side of public opinion here. And of course, they would argue, the Prime Minister and his cronies, that you bring in a windfall tax, it'll cut investment. No, it won't. And in fact, that was blown out of the water by the boss of BP.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Samantha says,
no difference to investment, no difference.
Now, Samantha says, it's not burning us at all. It's bloody freezing us. Now,
Yeah.
seeing as someone just suggested there, it's Star Wars Day today. It's May the 4th be with you, everybody. Let's suggest that the Tories might be saying these are not the profits you are looking for. It's something else entirely. But of course, Rishi, as you said, told Mumsnet that he was thinking about it because he got badgered. And then Boris ruled it out completely, which probably means it's nailed on in October. It'll definitely be happening when prices rise again. But by that point, of course, if that's when the Tories do decide to start doing something more, a lot of people will have suffered for a very long time, and it might make very little difference to them. I hope Elsie's still with us, but there may be other people who don't even survive to the point where anything they can do in October actually kicks in and helps them once the weather starts getting cold. And like you said, Kevin, the argument is from the government that if they tax the companies, there'll be no new investment in energy infrastructure. And we'll be stuck on oil and gas forever. We'll never be able to rely on solar and wind and nuclear and all the other things.
Yeah.
David says, when is the government going to release the funding so the country will be supplied with free warm buses? Yeah, we could all have a bus pass. Maybe, I don't know if that's cheaper than a windfall tax or not, but maybe that's a solution. Maybe Elsie's cracked it for us. But I can remember people in blue rosettes, Kevin, saying that there would never be any infrastructure investment if we don't let companies keep their profits. And I can remember people in blue rosettes saying that about the water companies, the rail companies, the gas companies. And what's happened? They keep their profits and there's no real investment. But like you said, Bernard Looney yesterday, the boss of BP, when he was asked, I think by journalists, said what infrastructure projects would be cancelled if you had a windfall tax. And he said, none whatsoever. So can the government position hold? They're going to have to crumble, aren't they?
Yeah, logic and possibly political electoral arithmetic would suggest so, but the national insurance increase in April last month didn't make any sense politically or economically at this stage, and yet they went ahead with it. So if you're looking at things with a common sense approach, it isn't always the case, although they have at the same time been lots of U-turns on policies. But governing parties, particularly when they've been in power a long time, and this lot have won 4 elections, elections have been there 4 years, they can lose touch, and it can all happen very, very quickly. And you watched yesterday with Boris Johnson coming out against a windfall tax, which they claim would cut investment. BP, the investor, says no, it wouldn't. And then sort of no sympathy or empathy really with Elsie, who you mentioned, the 77-year-old pensioner who is going on a London bus for most of the day to keep warm, so he doesn't have to turn the heating on at home. Maybe they can put down on the side of buses, hop on and keep warm.
Exactly.
Your own bill crisis.
Maybe that's the next Tory election pledge.
Get on a bus.
That's past everyone.
But you saw, and everyone who watched or has read that Good Morning Britain interview with Susanna Reid. I thought gave a masterclass in interviewing that Boris Johnson, he already claimed he introduced the bus pass she was using if he wanted some gratitude for that. Well, he didn't actually. It was another deceit by the Prime Minister. In fact, he's reduced the time Elsie can use it because his government forced the Mayor of London to say people like Elsie can't use her bus pass Monday to Friday before 9 a.m. now. So she'll be a bit colder. But it kind of, you just saw a Prime Minister running out of road, I thought.
Yeah, it's getting to that point, isn't it? And I'm getting very much the sense of sort of, I'm not going to try and say the French version, but end of regime. We saw it at the end of the Major years, at the end of the Blair and Brown years as well. This sense of a government that's just been in power too long, a party, and it's lost touch, like you said. Now, Laura says, how long do we have until the next general election? More than 2.5 years, Laura. We're not even at the halfway point yet. Buckle up. It's May 24. May 24 is the last date. You can have it. So it's then. Yeah, so some time to go. But the Tories are pretty good at hanging on to power. They've ruled most of the last 3 centuries, and they can get rid of leaders much more ruthlessly than Labour ever can. They can say, look, we've got somebody else. You want to change, we got change, and they can disown everything they were backing in the cabinet. They want
TV and radio and telling the papers they supported and offer new policies. But you feel there's almost a tipping point now for Johnson. And that interview just showed he doesn't get it. And no one's laughing anymore when he makes little quips. They're kind of laughing at him in a rather harsh way.
He's not really making many of his quips either. They seem to have stopped a bit. I keep asking your questions, everybody. What do you think about the windfall tax? What do you think about the cost of living? How is it affecting you? What do you think the government should do, if anything? And Tracy says, would a windfall tax put money in the average person's pocket or just go to the government? The Labour plan at the moment is for a 10% extra tax for 1 year on the energy giants. That would raise, they reckon, about £1.2 billion. And they say that would give up to £600 off your average energy bill. So it wouldn't be money, cash for you to spend, but it would be money off your energy bill. So you wouldn't have to spend as much, put it that way. And as far as some of the other parties, Kevin, it's roughly the same, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's 600 million is Labour's overall package, including the VAT suspension, because that windfall tax would have to be shared if it was just across the board. 28 million households I saw in the country, so it wouldn't be a massive amount, but it would be something. And it just comes down to whose side you are on. And you're right, the Liberal Democrats, the SNP, Plaid, the Greens are all looking to help families much more than the government is. Now, some people will rather cynically say, well, that's you're in opposition, you can say what you like, you don't have to implement it. But a good government, a good governing party would nick the better ideas and would implement them themselves. That's smart politics. But for some reason, they're just digging in on this windfall tax, which I think will come to just symbolise a greater distance between them and the general public, than the electorate, than the voters, and just not getting how much people are feeling the squeeze in what is the biggest cost of living crisis since the 1950s. That's 70 years ago almost.
I can see them thinking that we should leave this until October and announce it when people are really desperate and they really want it, and then they'll be really grateful. And I think by that point, actually, it will look like they're just doing what they're told to do by Keir Starmer, number one. And number two, it will be too late, because you've already had a summer where, even if you haven't had the heating on, you've had to pay the energy bill to keep your water on, keep your water hot, and to cook your food and so on. So it's still going to have affected a lot. The pain will have been felt. You've already wounded everybody. They're not going to be grateful by the time.
Yeah, it's kind of manana politics, always putting it off and then hoping for gratitude when you do something. But if you've emptied people's wage packets and their wallets and purses and bank accounts in the meantime, they're not going to give you untold gratitude. They're not going to put out the bunting and cheer to the rafters. They're going to be thinking, why did you hurt me for so long? You've just got bored of it now. You're worried to save your own political skin. It's not about me. So I think it's a dangerous, high-risk strategy by Johnson and the Conservative Party.
Yeah, and it's economic game theory, that. And they should know that's what led to the Brexit vote. It's people who've been hurt by what they perceived as European Union and the status quo, and they wanted to change it. And you think if anyone understood that, it would be this government. But the same thing.
Well, you're right, Foxy. I think there were two big drivers of Brexit. One was an anti-immigration feeling, sadly, and the other was austerity, where people are being kicked around by David Cameron and George Osborne, and all of a sudden they had a bit of power. I think they made the wrong mistake.
So I think the same calculation will be going on when it comes to the next election as well. Now, Andrew says, let's see what happens in the local elections, which of course are tomorrow. Hopefully people will vote with their pockets. And they do say, don't they, Kevin, that a lot of local elections are fought on national grounds. The Tories are expecting a bit of a beating because it's midterm. Labour did very well in 2018 with some of these seats, so they're not expecting to do brilliantly better because they can't really quite. They've already done quite well in these seats. So do you think we're on track actually for a bit of a kind of local election, or is it going to be some kind of massive bloody nose for someone? I predict every party will claim a huge success.
Labour and the Liberal Democrats nationally will claim they did better than they expected, and the Tories will say they did better than they expected to and didn't lose as many seats. That's what they'll do. They're all in expectation management.
Yeah, and as Mike says,
yeah.
Mike says here, are the predictions of Tories losing more than 500 seats tomorrow expectation management? So if they only lose 250, Johnson can claim it's not as bad as the doom-mongers expected. We've done very well for a midterm, really, blah, blah. I'm not as unpopular as everyone thought I was. I'm only quite unpopular.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. He hit the nail on the head there. That's what it's all about. They're unreliable guides to general elections. In truth, we always look for something. William Hague and Ian Duncan Smith, when they were Tory leaders, at times when they did well in local elections, and neither got within sniffing distance of Downing Street. But at the same time, it's real people going out and voting. The turnout is probably going to be less than half what you would get in a general election. So that adds to the mix and why you can't really use them as a map to where you're going. But no, it's indicative, and sometimes you can get MPs being very worried if they're losing council seats in their areas, because it means opposition parties can begin badgering away, knocking on doors, getting a higher profile, and you might get change, years down the line. But yeah, they will all be pleased in some way.
Apart from
Labour's got more candidates than the Tories, but the Tories have more councillors than Labour at the moment. Lib Dems seem to have detoxified themselves in the blue wall seats, so it'll be interesting. It'll give us something to talk about and look at. But
interesting.
What
the Dowden was saying about Lib Lab Pact in the Shires and not putting up enough people in seats. I have postal vote, right? And I have my vote. I saw my ballot paper a week or two ago. And I live in a very Tory area, in a rural area. So you would expect Labour to not bother and the Lib Dems to pitch up, right? Because the Lib Dems do occasionally win elections around here and get council seats and so on. But no, Kevin, the Lib Dems have quit. They're not even on the ballot paper. The only choice was Tory, red or green. That was it. So if you are a Tory voter and you want to protest against Boris, you've either got to vote for the communists or the hippies.
Yeah.
And if you're a Lib Dem voter or a Labour voter, you're quite happy, but kind of think, is Labour ever going to get anywhere around here? It's not going to happen. So why are the Lib Dems quitting at the terms of a Lib Lab Pact? I think absolute tripe. If anyone wants to know.
I know I'm one of the large part of the country that's voted tactically in elections. You're not going to get what you really want, and try and vote for something that isn't. It'll stop getting what you don't really want. There are localized pacts. I know, for instance, Plaid Cymru and the Green Party have one in Cardiff. You get localized pacts like that, but there's no formal pact or even an unofficial pact between Labour and the Lib Dems in these council elections. But what really made me laugh, Foxy, is Dowden's claiming there is with no evidence. He's looking at seat numbers, but Labour's competing in more seats than the Conservatives. So if Labour's in a pact with the Lib Dems, who are the Conservatives in a pact with? It's just you often find it hard to get candidates. But doesn't Dorsey Dowden, the Tory chair, doesn't he remember that his own party had a Brexit party pact in 2019 to damage Labour? Doesn't he remember that his own party had to rely on DUP votes from 2017 to 2019 in Parliament? Doesn't he remember his own party was in the Condemn coalition with the Lib Dems and Nick Clegg for 5 years from 2010?
It's probably got more to do with the fact that the Labour and the Lib Dems haven't got that much money, and therefore they can't contest every seat, and they're going to go for the ones they've got the most chance of winning. I
mean, I personally think a national party should stand somebody in every seat in every election, so you can collect the votes. But I understand organisationally why that doesn't happen. You can see why. I think by-elections are slightly different in terms of, I'm pretty sure when the Wakefield by-election happens, the Lib Dems won't put up much of an effort. They'll have a candidate because they'll want Labour to win, they're most likely. And in the Tiverton and Honiton by-election, I don't think Labour will fight it that hard nationally, because the Lib Dems, although they came third last time, they're probably best placed to overturn a huge Tory majority of 26,000, which is bigger than was overturned in North Shropshire or Cheshire and Amersham, those seats the Lib Dems gained. But
the
there is an argument for a pact, progressive alliance. I think there is.
The Southwest does like voting for Lib Dems, and perhaps some of the Lib Dems sex scandals we've had in the past probably could do with a tractor or two. Who knows? Jean says, "What a lot of rubbish! It's a setup. I think she's talking about Elsie on her bus. The elderly wouldn't be on buses that time before 9 a.m. anyway. What a stupid setup. We're 80-year-old pensioners, worked all our life as ambulance technicians, and just cut your cloth till we get through this. Jean, first, let's take these things one at a time.
All heart there.
No, if it was a setup, then everyone who knew that lady and everyone who worked at GMB and everyone who had interviewed her and everyone who's seen her on the news recently and everyone who drives her on a bus, right, will be phoning up a newspaper right now going, it's a setup, I know she's an actress, right? And they're not. And Ofcom's not having it reported to them or anything else because it is actually true. That is Elsie. And when the journalist goes around and sees her, they says, well, can I see your rent bill? Can I see your council tax bill? And they write down the figures. And that's how we do these things. So it's not a setup. That is her life. And if you've been ambulance technicians, I assume you may well have an NHS pension as well as the state pension, which means you may be doing better than Elsie to start with. Now, NHS pensions aren't brilliant. I know my mum's on one, but it may be that you are able to cut your cloth, and congratulations, well done for you. But some people, and Elsie's living in rented accommodation, she's sort of stuck with what she's got in her situation. She's on a very basic state pension and that's it. She can't cut her cloth anymore. There's no cloth left. That's the point for her. Now, Lulu says she's spending £1,200 on water, £3,600 on electric, £2,200 on gas, £720 on the phone, and only gets £665 pension a month. She's dead in the water. Thank you, Tories. Oh, crikey, Lulu, they sound like horrible figures. There is anecdotally some evidence that the companies that set your direct debits are just racking it up without reference to your meter, if you're on a meter. So make sure that those are not estimates and those are based on your actual usage. Okay, that may bring your bills down a bit. We have seen that happen once or twice before somewhere else. So the one thing I just want to say before we move on to the next story, Kevin, is that in that interview with Susanna Reid, now we've all had grandmothers, most of us, and most of us have liked them some way. But when someone's telling you about Elsie's problems, 77 years old, can't afford this, there'd be some emotion. You'd feel sorry. You'd go, well, that sounds awful for Elsie. And I'm really sorry to hear that, but I'm going to try to help her and do this, that, and the other. And there was not a flicker of empathy. I mean, obviously she's there to catch him out and he knows it's a bit of a game and he's trying to do the right thing. But he says something stupid about bus passes and I could feel his spin doctor behind the camera going, ugh, like this. But there's no sense that he knows or has a connection to what Elsie is feeling, or Lulu that we've just had. It's theoretical to him. It's not someone that he can identify with, is it?
No, well, remember, Foxy, when he described £250,000 a year he was getting from the Daily Telegraph as chicken feed. This man of the people act of his was always an act. He doesn't sympathise or empathise. He's just very calculating about himself. And I've never seen it so starkly exposed as it was yesterday in Downing Street. He doesn't get it. He's out of touch. And I think this is going to be his big weakness. And in a sense, we saw it during Partygate. You are imposing what were draconian COVID rules. I can understand why they weren't reduced. And then he felt he didn't have to follow them himself when other people couldn't go to funerals, say goodbye to dying loved ones, and had all sorts of changes to their life that were uncomfortable. And I think now on the cost of living crisis, he just doesn't get it. He doesn't know any Elsies. He doesn't know Lulu's. It's just they're just people he wants to vote for him, and he used to be able to get them to do it with a little ruffle of his hair and a silly little quip. Well,
that's half the trouble. Everyone in government, they've never ever been £2.50 short at the till. Never.
No,
they've never had to put something back on the shelf.
No, you think of those in all the top jobs. The Chancellor married to an heiress richer than the Queen. Kwasi Kwarteng went to a very expensive private school. You think of them all. They've probably never had to lie awake at night worrying about money. And I think those of us who have at some point in our lives, it never leaves you, and it informs you for the rest of your life. In some ways, it scars you. But I think it also makes you more aware of other people, even when you're comfortable yourself. Like you can see people are doing less well and often sometimes terribly badly. And you think, they need help. At least at the very least a helping hand and a sympathetic ear. And they're not getting that from Boris Johnson.
There's no sympathy. I think he was raised without sympathy. That's probably part of the trouble. Now, keep asking your questions, everybody. What do you think about the cost of living crisis, windfall taxes, Boris Johnson's empathy levels? Elsie, let us know. Get into the comments and ask us your questions. But now, first off, to some other dreadful news about the cost of living and people that we don't feel sorry enough for. And the royals are having an argument about which massive free house they get to live in. Now, they're playing a game of what can only really be called palace musical chairs, Kevin, right? It goes a bit like this. Now, Harry and Meghan were given Frogmore Cottage on the Windsor estate, which is like a multi-home mansion on a royal estate with 24-hour security. They rebuilt it all at their own expense, but then decided to live there. Then decided they weren't going to live there, and they moved to a California mansion instead, and then they repaid the cost of having done up the house. Then Eugenie, Andrew's daughter, and Jack Brooksbank, her husband, moved into this freshly renovated, empty mansion, and sometimes Harry and Meghan come to stay. In fact, they've been once. But anyway, there they are in this nice new done-up house. Meanwhile, Kate and Wills have got bored of their massive Norfolk pile where they've spent the last few years, and they've got their eye on another property on the Windsor estate called Adelaide Cottage, which is closer to the Queen's house at Windsor Castle. But now Prince Andrew wants Adelaide Cottage for Eugenie in Frogmore Cottage, apparently on the grounds that she needs somewhere bigger to stay for when Harry doesn't visit. And it all boils down, it seems, to wanting to be as close as possible physically to the Queen. And being close to the Queen, somehow, like in chess, makes you more influential. I've got to ask, Kevin, why don't they just all move into the huge bloody castle they're living next door to then?
I could see maybe why the Queen at 96 now doesn't want them. I can understand that. But these royals are going to destroy themselves from the inside. They're doing more to damage the monarchy than Republicans like me or you could ever achieve. But there's this sense of entitlement, this privilege that they were just born to get all of these perks. And there's old sleazy Andrew again, just trying to maneuver for his family. And it's kind of really distasteful. I mean, I laugh at it, but it's the laugh of scorn.
Yeah, you've got to laugh at it because otherwise you just sit and weep.
Yeah,
there are people who are paying £500 a month bedroom tax.
Yeah,
and here we've got a bunch of people who don't actually have really a job between them.
Yeah,
right. Living on benefits in properties with multiple bedrooms that they never use for occasional visiting Californians. They don't pay anything. What?
There are more than 1 million families on social housing waiting lists, waiting for a secure, sort of affordable home, a roof over their heads. And yet these royals have all these houses and they're squabbling about who gets what. I mean, it is really distasteful. It's disgusting. It's unacceptable. It's indefensible. You can't justify it. And you get an insight into them. Well, Platinum Jubilee, some people want to wave their union flags and say, God bless her. But this is the system that's producing a hereditary monarchy, is producing a family that, if it was Benefit Street, it would be Welfare Benefits Street with footmen and servants and ladies in waiting. That's what it is. They're just living high on the hog in an old system where they're descended from warlords and they've still got the spoils and they're fighting each other over who gets what.
I dread to think what would happen if there was an actual real war that these lot had to sort of lead us into, because I'm not entirely sure they'd do particularly well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll have to sort of wait and see what happens with that one, won't we? But I think I saw something a little the other day about Prince William suggesting that some cottages on the royal estates be used to house the homeless, but or some kind of charity move with it. But obviously he's suggesting this sort of many years down the road at some point. Yeah, we'll let the plebs in at some point. But of course, if the royals weren't there, it'd just be sold to a Russian oligarch. But at least then we could freeze the assets and do something with them. Anyway, keep asking your questions, everybody. What do you think about the royal game of musical palaces? Do you think it matters? Do you think that Kate and Will should have wherever they like? Do you think they should have as many mansions as they please? Does it matter to you? Or, does it... The running costs of these places are quite expensive. I don't think I want to live in one. But still, get into the questions, get into the comments, ask us your questions, and we'll try and wrap up a bit at the end. Now, first off, there is some good news in the world, and here we found it for you. Here it is. Right, now, in the pandemic, staycations became very much the thing, and camping equipment in particular became about as pricey as a full tank of gas. It costs as much to go camping now as it does for about a fortnight in the Algarve, Kevin, including planes and upgrades and everything else. But it all worked out very well for 4 mates who pitched a tent in a field in Wiltshire, and then next morning found a hoard of Roman coins just 6 foot from their tent flap. And they're now going to make £40,000 profit on the trip. Amazing. Kevin, do you think this means that Boris's next piece of brilliant advice will be for all of us to invest in metal detecting equipment so we can pay our fuel bills?
Maybe you could suggest Elsie gets one, spends a pension on it instead of getting on a bus. Get on your bike, pet. Get out there. You start metal detecting. You can stay warm in a tent and a sleeping bag, Elsie. Maybe he's going to take that line. I mean, I'll say good luck to, who is it? Let's have a look at the lads. Robert, Dave and Mick, got a nice little windfall. That should be about 13 grand each. I don't know if it's taxable or tax-free, but good luck to them. But who goes camping with a metal detector? I often go camping. I think, I'll take a stool.
Metal detectorists do.
Yeah, I know. Well, maybe we'll all have to start. Maybe that's it. Maybe you're quite right. You could, buy a metal detector and win a year's energy bill money or something. Do it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Now, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. I don't think we've got any questions to wrap with, so we'll have to say goodbye for now. But just before you go, Jean says, hang on. Jean says, why don't they open Buckingham Palace for the refugees? The last word there in your sentence, Jean, is why they don't open it up. It's because it's refugees. But of course, if they were royal refugees, like Prince Philip was, right, in Greece, he could come in, not a bother. But, just your average pleb from the basement of a steelworks has been bombed to hell in Mariupol. No, you need a visa, chum. You can't come in. Sorry. So we'll have to wait and see. Maybe if they had some marriageable princesses left, they'd let some foreign princes in. David says, what happened to Boris flipping into Latin to get out of an awkward question? I do miss them. I know. I can't really remember much Latin apart from the rude bits, so I better not quote any here. But I think I'll just say, before we go, Kevin, for those of you wondering, in the 32 minutes that we've been on air, BP has made £1.2 million profit. So you should all be really glad that the government says that's absolutely fine and there's no need to tax it any further. Thank you for joining us, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. We'll see you again next Monday for another edition of the News Agenda when the Fox's Den will have a puppy in it. So fingers crossed we get through it in one piece. See you all next week, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.